Good morning, everyone. Suzanne Taylor King here for another episode of Unlock Your Way with STK. Can't wait for today's conversation. Sean Murray is a high performance coach to leaders and executives, also a culture innovator, and more importantly, a athlete, an Olympic athlete. Welcome, Sean.
Thanks, Suzanne. I'm happy to be here, and I appreciate the introduction. Although I do want to say I wrote a book about Olympic athletes, but I don't know if I can put myself in the category of an Olympic athlete. Although I do like to run and do some things, I did write a book about an Olympic team, which I hope we talk about today because just coming off of the Olympics, I think people are still feeling that kind of glow of watching the Paris Olympics, and we have the LA Olympics coming up. And yeah, I hope I learned a few things about what it takes to win a gold medal.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to just say, I want to explain how we met because the synergies and the commonalities I often explain to my clients and my tribe, doing things outside of your work, meaning outside of networking, outside of posting on social media, is where you're going to meet the best people that are in alignment with you. And I talk often about the learning community, lattice work, and how there's not really, it's not a networking thing. And we met in one session of that, and I looked into you and then asked you to be on the podcast. We rescheduled because of my surgery. Total other story, right? But what was incredible to me is the similarities in the two of us as coaches, as athletes. My son's name is Sean. Your sport of choice is volleyball. That's his sport of choice. And when I mentioned to you about him trying out the volleyball team, your book came the day he made the team to my house.
That's great.
And when I showed it to him, he was like, "Oh, well, it's funny that it came today." I said, "Oh, not funny. Look at the guy's name who wrote it." And he was like, "Whoa, I guess I have to read it." And I handed him the book and I said, "You read it first and tell me what you thought." And he actually crafted a couple questions for you, even though he's still sleeping.
Right.
A couple questions for you if you're open to that.
Oh, that's wonderful. I can't wait to hear.
Yeah, it's I tell us a little bit about, we'll skip volleyball for now, but tell us a little bit about how that led you to the career of coaching and high performance habits.
Well, the connection, my connection to volleyball actually comes through my father, and so it's kind of neat that you're telling me the story about your son and
Yeah.
the fact the book showed up on the day he made the team and everything, and because there is an element of this book about uh, fathers, mothers, and fathers and sons, and because it is a book about the men's volleyball team, and it's the 1984 team, and so the connection to this story is that my father was the team psychologist for the 1984 team, along with a colleague of his.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to the Olympics in 84. I was young. I was 13 years old. The Olympics were in Los Angeles, and I got to see a team up close go through the course of the Olympics and eventually win a gold medal. And I knew a little bit behind the scenes about what was happening around building a team, building a culture, alignment, getting a team to play at the highest level. Didn't fully understand it at the time. I was pretty young, but being inspired by that team, being inspired by my father and his work, I ended up going into this field that you and I are in, Suzanne, of whatever we want to call it, organization development, leadership development. And that's what inspired me into the career I am today. And then later, in life, about 6 years ago, I was inspired to write the book about that team through some other events and everything. So yes, this volleyball did play a role in me getting into organizational consulting and leadership development and coaching. And I was inspired by my parents in some way. And it's been a wonderful journey.
Yeah, I think what stood out for me, and my son's first question was, how did your dad and the connection to volleyball influence you seeing it as a leadership opportunity, or the skills that are involved in volleyball are the skills that are involved in business? And that connection, my son saw it, and I saw it when I was reading the book. How did that inspire you?
Yeah, so it's interesting how these things develop.
Mhm.
Early on in the early 1980s, before the Olympics, 2 or 3 years before the Olympics, about 2 years before the Olympics, this Olympic volleyball team had went on what's called an outward bound course.
Mm.
And it was through a mountainous region in southeastern Utah near Moab, the Abajo Mountains, in the middle of winter. And that made a big impression on me. Again, at the time, I didn't really know why a volleyball team was going hiking in the snow in the middle of winter, snowshoeing. And
Yeah.
my father told me about this. He was part of the working with the coaches and the players, and a series of decisions were made that this was a good step towards winning a gold medal. Or they didn't know they were going to win a gold medal, but a good step towards building team cohesion and getting this team to play at the highest level. And so in the back of my mind, that I always wondered, well, what's the connection there? Why are you taking a team and taking them through a wilderness course when they're trying to get better at volleyball? Volleyball's inside. Most of the players were from Southern California. They grew up on the beach. They didn't particularly want to be out trudging around in the snow in the middle of winter. Yet somehow I believe that event helped them in some way. And the coaches thought the same thing. And so that little experience, got me thinking about, well, what is it that gets a team to its highest level? And so later, as I go through my career, I'm doing a lot of work in this field, and I started to understand more about their story. I hadn't done all the research yet, but when it came time to, later, the reason I wrote the book is my wife gave me another book called Boys in the Boat, which your network or those listening are probably familiar with Boys in the Boat, because George Clooney produced the movie that was made, and the book is everywhere. I mean, you go into an airport bookstore and you can't get away from the book. It's a great book. It's about the University of Washington crew team in 1936 that eventually wins a gold medal at the 1936 Berlin Olympics, the so-called Nazi Olympics, where Hitler was presiding and all that. And it's just a wonderful book, but it got me thinking about the power of story and how in what we do, Suzanne, that story is so important, and that's how people learn, is they connect through story. And it occurred to me, I wanted to write a book that would help my clients, help anyone get better at being a leader, get better at building a high-performing team and a positive culture, and become the best possible team they can become, maybe even the best team in the world at what they do. And so what better way to do that than to study a team that had actually done it? And because of my father's connection, and because of that little fact I had buried deep down inside, that I knew they'd gone on this outward bound trip, which was a 3-week course. This was not just a 2 or 3 day.
Oh, no, they were no joke. I had friends that did that in high school and college.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, No, thank you. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, not everybody wants to step into that, but
No.
when you do, you often grow, right? So,
Yes.
um, anyway, so that's sort of the roundabout way about how I came to write the book, my father's connection, and just a little bit about the very fascinating journey that this team went on to
Mhm.
win a gold medal.
Yeah, and how did that affect your athleticism? Being exposed to that at a young age, did it give you a love of, I mean, maybe not just volleyball, but other sports, being fit, being active? How did that affect you growing up, having that exposure?
I think it did. I've always been very active, and being at the Olympics in '84 was a life-changing experience.
Mm,
It's If you have an opportunity to go to an Olympics, it's a wonderful celebration, bringing the world together, and you get a chance to see athletes performing at the highest level. It's very inspiring. I hope to take my family to the LA Olympics in 2028. We in this country, we have an opportunity coming up. It's not easy to get to
yes,
some of these countries for Olympics, and
yes.
financially, logistically, but every 30 years or so, it seems to come back to the United States, and I'm really excited about 2028 in LA. And
Yeah.
the closing ceremonies were just a few days ago in Paris, and they did a little montage of bringing the Olympics back across the Atlantic over here to, on the West Coast. I'm based in Seattle. But I do think I was inspired. I remember in '84 and being around this team that I picked up running after
Mm,
that, because maybe it was Carl Lewis and the track athletes of the 1984 Olympics, who were also very inspiring. Uh,
mhm,
and So I picked up running. I got very into basketball, but became my sport. I didn't end up becoming a volleyball player, and it might be due to my height. It helps to be a little high.
it does,
Nowadays, to
it
be
does.
short. Yeah, but no, it's definitely inspiring. I've always been athletic in some way, because I believe in the power of the body to if you to get energy
Mm.
out of your day. And for me, it's sort of meditative to have some kind of exercise, and I've always tried to keep that up. And yeah, it probably had something to do with that team and that exposure.
Yeah, I really think, I was in high school in the '80s, but sometime in the '70s, I'm not sure when he won all of his medals. There was a swimmer by the name of Mark Spitz, and I'm showing my age here, remembering him, and he stood out to me. Not only was he handsome, but he had this mustache, right? And it was like this Tom Selleck mustache, um, and my mom just thought he was dreamy, and so that was, like, contagious, but I was a swimmer. So I found inspiration in his performance at that highest level, and watching it on TV, um, made me wanna go in the pool and do my best. And it's amazing how the Olympics do that, because we don't watch those sports on TV, not like baseball and football and ice hockey, right? They're the sports that are on in my house all the time. Well, I'm never playing one of those sports when I was younger. So it looked like, oh, this is a guy who's doing a sport that I do, and finding that inspiration was really cool.
Definitely. And I remember Mark Spitz. It reminds me of Michael Phelps. He was the Michael Phelps
Yeah,
of our
yeah.
generation, right? Yeah. And then we saw the French swimmer,
Mm,
Marshall, Leon
yeah,
Marshall, who looks like he could maybe do something similar in LA in
mhm,
2028. But yeah,
yeah.
no, I love that story, Suzanne. That's very. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I think it's always, good to find inspiration in something. I think that's, um people are just so amazing, and I'm always curious about other people and where they get their inspiration from. I think that what was really cool about meeting you and reading your book and the synergies involved. And I think one of the things that stood out in the book to me was communication. Communication to me is threefold. It's visual, it's auditory, but it's also a feeling in leadership that, personally, I want to be the leader that people get to follow, that they're lucky enough to hire. I don't want to be the one that they feel they have to.
Yeah, well, good leaders earn that respect.
Yes.
They earn
Yes.
that the right to have followers because they're out there in front. They're doing it. They're living it. They're accountable. They're responsible, and they're communicating. Communicating is
Yeah.
a critical part of that.
Yeah.
When I did the research into this team, I learned a lot about the coach. I had known the coach a little bit before. His name was Doug Beal.
Mm-hmm.
And Doug Beal was a player in the 1970s, and he
Oh,
had
wow.
been through a very challenging time of the U.S. national team. He was on the U.S. national team when my father and started working with the team, and he really believed in some of the things that the team psychologist was doing to try to build team. But there were a lot of egos, a lot of individual players who were very good, but they weren't playing together as a team. I think we see this a lot in business
Yes.
and anywhere. It's
Yeah.
a team requires a group of people to come together and put the success of the team above everything else, and put
Yes.
the mission in front of maybe their own ego or their own personal goals.
Yeah.
And so Doug was the kind of person, through communication, he had to find his way, but through communication, um, dedication, and being very deliberate about getting the right people on the team, he was able to forge a team. And by saying getting the right people on the team, I think another element that Doug Beal and USA Volleyball discovered through their, I'd say, severe
Mhm.
underperformance in the 1970s, was the best volleyball team in America is not comprised of necessarily the best volleyball players together on the court.
Wow.
It's the best players that play together as a team.
Wow.
Such a team sport. And you could go to LA on the beaches or to some of the great college programs at the time and find incredible players, talented players. They could jump higher, they could swing their arm faster, they could dig a ball or what have you. But not all of those players really
Mhm.
knew how to play as a team. And so what Doug and his assistant coaches, and through the help of my father, what they had to do is figure out who can really buy into this system, and find the best players that play together as a team. And that's the team that ended up going to the Olympics in '84. And communication was important. I'll just say one more thing about communication. I think
Yeah.
feedback is a critical part of communication, and it's often a part of communication that we don't lean into or embrace, because it's sometimes hard. You have to have difficult conversations. Sometimes
Yes.
we don't want to hear feedback about ourselves, or sometimes as leaders we fear giving the feedback because we don't know how someone's going to take it. We don't want to hurt their feelings and so forth. And the same thing on athletic teams, often between, say, the coaches and the players, there needs to be feedback
Mhm.
both ways. Of course, the coaches are conditioned to be giving feedback to the players often, but what's not always standard is for the players to give feedback to the coaches. And what Doug and his team were open to was getting feedback from the players. And what my father helped establish was a process where the players could give feedback. What are the coaches doing that is actually helping them, and what are the coaches doing that they feel is not helping them develop as a team? And sometimes the coaches had to hear that. They'd often
Yeah.
write it down on little 4x6 cards. My father would have the players write down, give some feedback to the coaches, and then he would read it and then feed it back to the coach. At first, it felt uncomfortable. It wasn't something that they'd been through before. It's like, as a coach, it's like, I give the players feedback, they don't give me feedback. Come on.
Right.
But
Right.
they came around to it. It became an important part of the team, and it just feeds into what you were saying about communication.
Yeah. Well, I see the connection between you working with a company on this, because I know feedback for me as a coach is number one. I beta test everything I do with a group of trusted people, people that I know, maybe not know super well, but I always have a group or at least a couple individuals experience what I do, get feedback. And it's interesting that you say the other way, because I just immediately thought of a group I had, and I have feedback for two of the members, how they could get more out of the groups that they are in. And it could be as simple as, don't multitask when you're in a group environment. Take better notes and don't talk as much. But we don't give that feedback the other way so many times. How has that helped some of your clients today, getting it in both directions?
Well, in organizations where you often don't see as clear communication on the feedback channel is leaders getting feedback on how their behavior, how their words, how their actions are impacting the organization.
Yeah.
And so what we try to do is establish a culture where it's okay for information to flow back through up to the leaders, and the leaders are open to it. You have to be aware enough and have enough humility to know that everything you're doing may not be having the impact you think it's
Yes.
might not all be positive. And so I try to work with leaders to be open to listening to their employees about what's working, what's not working, be open to adjusting
Mm.
and trying new things, and having the humility to know that it there may be things that they're doing that are having some kind of a negative impact that they want to course correct. And good leaders want to know that, and are willing to listen and accept that, and are not so tied up in their own ego that they can't listen and adjust. And so that's important. And just, organizations in general need feedback, need to be constantly adjusting to feedback from their customers, right? Feedback from
Yeah.
their partners. If you're a high performing company, you're gonna have those channels. You're gonna listen. It doesn't mean that everything that comes in is 100% valid, but having those channels open just makes you better.
Yes. And it spurred a question within me. Like the first time that's happening within an organization, do you find that it has to be anonymous feedback back to the leader the first couple times so that the team or the employees feel that psychological safety and being honest with the feedback?
Yeah, it's not a one size fits all, and there's so many organizations that have it depends a lot on the context. And
Mhm.
if you do have a leader that's built that culture and has the psychological safety, and it's a lot easier for that information to come from a person that they know who it
Right.
is, an individual, and not necessarily anonymous. There's 360 feedback, which is a popular method, and it often involves
Mhm.
anonymity from the direct reports perspective. And I think there's a time and a place for that. Definitely depends on where your organizational culture is on the spectrum of building trust. Are you a low trust organization at the
Yes.
time? Are you a high trust organization? And it depends on where the leaders are from their own maturity level, and all
Mm.
those things you should probably take into consideration. Uh, but definitely, you have to find the right method, but there needs to be a channel for feedback and communication for there to be a high performing team. That I truly believe. And I saw that with this volleyball team. And it wasn't there in the 70s when the team was struggling.
Mhm.
They started implementing it. It even came out. Well, communication was further fostered in the outward bound experience, and then other initiatives that they took on as they got closer to the Olympics to increase the communication, and it helped them become a better team.
Mm. I think the Outward Bound experience stands out to me because when you put somebody through something that requires something outside of their comfort zone, California kids in the mountains in the snow, like immediately, resilience is going to kick in. There's going to be a little toughness involved. I read a book not too long ago called Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. And it was basically, in today's society, we're so comfortable physically that it's hard to push out of your comfort zone emotionally, work-wise, because physically we're so comfortable. It's 90 degrees outside here today, and I'm standing here and it's 72 degrees. And, from my hot coffee that I warmed up before the call, like everything is so comfortable for us. And that getting uncomfortable, I think, is the conversation for teams and leaders. Really, what are your thoughts on that, pushing out of that comfort zone?
Well, it's a great insight, because what was happening with this team, one of the reasons the coaches decided that it was a good idea to go on this Outward Bound course was to make the players a little uncomfortable, to get them out of their comfort zone, to get them into an environment that's different, that's challenging, to build resilience, and go through a shared experience like that's an important part of the team. There's also, you can look at it from an individual perspective of maybe go try something you've never tried before, a marathon or some kind of endurance test for yourself. But for this team, it was a matter of recognizing that they weren't playing together at the level they could, and the diagnosis was trust and resilience. They had a history of being very competitive for the first few matches, but then not quite being able to win that final match, and then spiraling down and losing the match. In volleyball, as you've probably seen your son's games,
Mhm.
there's a momentum swing. There's huge momentum swings during games.
Oh, it's so emotional.
It's like one team just can't seem to make a mistake, and the other team can't seem to do anything right, and then it switches, and
Mhm.
you have to be able to control that. It is about resilience. It's about toughness. It's about sticking together. The coaches didn't think they had enough of that, and they thought, well, what could we do? And the idea came up of a shared significant life experience. And
Beautiful.
and in fact, the first idea was to have them go through boot camp together. They actually went out and reached out to the Marines, because there's a Marine base not far from San Diego where this team was based.
Yes.
And I don't know what would have happened in that alternative universe if they'd gone to boot camp together, but that didn't work. I think the Marines said, no, we're not in the business of taking athletic teams through our boot camp. But they did find Outward Bound, and Outward Bound's a very interesting organization. That is what they're about. They're about building resilience, and both personal and with team. And they designed a course. It's not so much that Outward Bound guides people through that's not what it's about. It's about teaching people to survive, teaching them how on their own, through their own knowledge and learning and toughness and building resilience, that they learn to survive in very inhospitable environments and challenging environments. And that's exactly what this course was designed to do. The players wanted to go to Malibu and camp out on the beach for a week. Or go sailing in Hawaii because someone had it's like, no, we want to get you out of the beach and into something totally different. And that's where that came, the idea of going to a winter type experience.
Yes. Thanks, Con, for your comment. Growth does not happen in the comfort zone. That's for absolute truth. So now I'm curious how you've used experiences like that with some of the teams that you've worked with.
Yeah, you can't often take a group of executives for 3 weeks out of their
No, 3 weeks would be a
environment.
long
Yeah,
time, but
put them in the wilderness. So
yeah.
you have to come up with other ways of doing that, right?
Mhm.
And so one way that I've done that is through business simulations. I think
Oh, okay.
that's a technique that you can take people out of their day to day and maybe even elevate them into a role that they're not familiar with, like a C-level role, and have
Mhm.
them run a business. And we can also take leaders, and if let's say I'm working with an HR leader, and have them go through a one-day business simulation where they're part of a leadership team, but they're the CFO, they're the chief financial officer, and then have the chief financial officer be the chief people officer, and have them make decisions about um, the finances or something that's out of their comfort zone. And all of a sudden they have a different appreciation. It's challenging. They have to work together. They have to listen to one another, coach
Yeah.
one another. And that's been one way that we've done it, because you have to find ways to do things that are, you can do in a day or two. But we often getting people out of the office, for these offsites, I'm
Mhm.
sure you do that kind of work too. And there's a reason why you want to get out of the office
Yes.
and get out of that environment, because you're just so comfortable. You immediately get into email, into your tasks, into tactical things. So
Mhm.
getting out of the office. You can also get people out of their comfort zone by having them talk about, like, in building trust, talk about uh, things personally. How did they build resilience in their life, or what challenges did they overcome in their life, and starting to share those things. That's sort of like emotionally
Yeah.
uh, out of their comfort zone. And so there's various techniques. I've done some ropes courses and things like that too. When you can. Anytime you can get out in nature and just do a hike on an offsite.
Mhm.
I sometimes take groups to Skamania Lodge, which is in southern Washington, on the border between Oregon and Washington, on the Columbia River Gorge. And there's all kinds of hikes around there. And just I find that getting them out, getting them on a hike, and then debriefing it and talking about just being in nature, it's amazing the connections and what people will how it will help them think differently, and hopefully have a refreshed look on their business when they just get out into nature.
Yeah, that's a beautiful spot there. You instantly took me back to being there and snowboarding at Mount Hood in the summertime, and, um, just how beautiful it was, and I can't imagine what that would be like to take a group of my clients on an adventure like that. I've dreamt of having a surf trip in Costa Rica where we mastermind your business and we surf in the afternoon. We mastermind in the morning and do yoga and mastermind and then go surfing in the afternoon. I'm like, sign me up. I need to figure this out
Oh, yeah.
because I want to do that. So I know if I want to do things like that, that other entrepreneurs, business owners need to get out of the office, whether you work from home or not, and have fresh eyes on your business when you come back, which has always been key for me. About 5 years ago, I was challenged by a coach that I had to go away on vacation without my phone. And I think I had an anxiety attack. I was like, what? No, I can't do that. And he said, "You're not a surgeon. Nobody's going to die while you're away. Like, what would it take for you to go away without your phone, and completely connect with your family without that device in your hand?" And I said, "It would require me to delete social media and email off of my phone. And that way I could only access it on my computer." And that's been a gold standard for
Oh,
me moving forward.
yeah.
Um, if I go away, and when I go away, which is often, there's no social media on my phone, and I still have not installed email back on my phone because it makes me distracted. Who wants to stand in line at the grocery store and see an email come over? No, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, getting away from that is, well, it
Key.
gets us out of our comfort zone, but it also forces us to be in the moment.
Yes.
And it, you sometimes think back, like, to this volleyball team, say in the 80s, going off on an outward bound.
Yeah.
They a different time when they weren't as just they got to experience life in a way, we all did back then, that was less connected, and it's harder to get back to that. And I think there's something
Yeah.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I talk about that a lot with friends, clients, that, it was just a different time for us back then, where if you were going away for 3 weeks, and I drove across the country, I'm trying to think what year it was, 1990, drove across the country with two girlfriends. I graduated college in 89 and they did in 90. And we packed up my car and we drove across the country to snowboard in a bunch of different places, go to Las Vegas, see California, all the things. And my mom was panic stricken. Panic stricken. There was no cell phone. We had a paper map in the car. And the disconnection to her was frightening. Of course, I was young and didn't think about that at all. And today, we don't have that issue. We're hyper connected. And I think communication has gone down because of being over connected, because you can always talk to people. Always. Everybody's just a text message away. How in the world do you improve communication when there's so many channels of communication within a team? I mean, there's email, there's boundaries that are needed with that, right? How do you improve it when there's all these different inputs of communication within a team?
Well, it certainly makes it more challenging, well, I guess
Mhm.
it's a double-edged sword there, because there's more opportunities to communicate with people through different channels. But yeah, you have to make a decision about which channel to get to, and how to
Yeah,
do that,
yeah,
uh, but I believe you just don't get away from the leader getting
yeah,
out in front and talking to people, whether it's on a Zoom call like this or in person. There's a
yeah,
time for Slack, there's a time for texting and, sharing information in that way. But people crave connection with other people, and authentic connection, and
yeah,
hearing what the leader has to say. Why are we doing this? Why is this a good idea? What thought process went into this decision? What's my role in this? Helping put together the whole picture of what this team is doing and why we're doing it. That's
yeah.
not going away. I don't think that's
No.
whatever technology or AI we come up with in the future. We're going to need humans to connect other humans together to get things done. And it comes down to some of those basics. And hopefully, uh, you know, any good leader will know there's lots of channels, but you can't get away from those basics.
Yeah. And now I'm going to ask a question for an anonymous giant company that I have awareness of and exposure to often. What would you say to a $30 trillion company whose company policy was all these meetings all the time, Zoom, on Teams, all the things, and nobody's ever on camera?
Well, I would say it's a bad idea. Uh,
Thank you.
I would say it's a bad idea.
Thank you. I didn't prep you before for that answer, so whew, thank you for
Uh,
that answer.
yeah, there's something about humans connecting by looking at each other, and looking at each other in the eye, and seeing our facial expressions,
Yes.
and understanding a little bit more about who we are from a human perspective, and not just the words coming out of a box.
Yeah.
That Yeah, I would. I know I've seen cultures like that and doing some training and work with organizations where you get on a Zoom call and all of a sudden the cameras are all off or they never even
Yeah,
come on,
yeah,
and I always try to use a little humor to try to get people to get back on the screen, because I know if it's going to be an effective meeting, if we're going to really
yes,
get a good use of the time that we have together, that we need to be present. And otherwise, what are we doing here?
yeah. I even say that in some workshops that I host, when people join and they're not on camera, I say, "Look, one of the magical things about what I do is I bring great people together, and if you're off camera, nobody can get to know you, you can't meet anybody, so you're just here listening to me, and part of the magic in what I do is the actual connection to other people, and I just think it's so, so important. I wouldn't I wouldn't want to work with a client who I had never seen and experienced their energy and body language and eye contact and all of that. I couldn't help them as well. So,
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
me, it just makes sense for human connection, and thank you for having
Yeah.
the same opinion. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Well, thank you so much for being here. I want to dive into a little bit of what you're currently working on in your business and basically promote yourself and tell us how to get in touch with you.
Yeah. So my company is called Real Time Performance. I work with organizations, large and medium sized organizations, mostly around building a high performing culture, helping teams become high performing teams, and also working with individual leaders and helping align culture with strategy and brand is another
Mhm.
area I work in. And I have a number of leadership experiences that I can bring to teams and to organizations. I mentioned one, this business simulation. There's a business simulation that I run. It's a 1 to 2 day program where people come together and teams of 4 or 5, and they run a business for a day, and they do the financial statements and they make decisions. And it's sort of like for airplane pilots that have to get into the flight simulator every
Mhm.
6 months with the FAA, but we do that in a business simulator, and they get to see what it's like, because I do believe in learning by doing, and not just in a
Yeah.
book or theoretically, that you get out and you learn, and you, based on your own actions, you come to an understanding of how the world works. And so getting leaders to do that. uh,
I love that so much, and I can't wait to hear more about that and how to connect people to that experience because the value in actually doing, theory's great. I've read 100 books this year and 100 last year, and theory is wonderful. But if you don't put anything into action from all of that theory, and I need to practice things before I actually do it. It's genius on your part what you've created.
yeah, it's a wonderful experience. And we've also developed a program on decision making, which I think is
Oh,
a very challenging skill in this environment that we're in.
mhm,
The technology we talked about earlier, the advent of AI, a fast moving environment that we find ourselves in. How do we make decisions? And decision
yeah,
making is an important part of leadership, an important part of culture for an organization too. How culture facilitates decision making. So we call that decision mojo, and helping people get their
good.
decision go back. And so that's another area of expertise that I've developed over the years. So yeah, thank you for inviting me on the show. It's been
You're so
wonderful.
welcome.
The writing the book and studying the team, Olympic team, has helped me pull out some lessons of what it takes to really be the best in the world, and to build a great organization. And I'm applying those to the groups that I get an opportunity to work with. And it's really fulfilling and gratifying to see an organization or team grow and develop and become better. And whatever little role I played in that. It's always nice to get an opportunity to do that. And I feel really blessed to be, in this field that we're in. So thank you, Suzanne.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. I look forward to future connections, and make sure I'll share all of your links in the comments and in the show notes. And if anyone wants to get in touch, we can do that through LinkedIn or Sean's website. And thank you again for being here. Appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.